My name is Sarah Chen, and I'm a 28-year-old librarian working at the Denver Public Library. I've always found comfort in the quiet rustle of pages and the familiar smell of old books. My apartment is small, my salary barely covers rent, and my biggest luxury is the occasional coffee from the shop downstairs. I thought I knew exactly what my life would look like for the next decade: predictable, simple, and financially tight. That Tuesday morning in October started like any other. The Colorado autumn air was crisp, painting the city in shades of amber and gold. I was cataloging returns when Mrs. Rodriguez, our head librarian, approached my desk with an expression I'd never seen before. "Sarah, there's someone here to see you," she said, her voice carrying an unusual weight. "He says he's a lawyer." I looked up from my computer screen, confused. "A lawyer? Are you sure he's looking for me?" "He specifically asked for Sarah Chen. He's waiting in the conference room." My heart began to race. The only legal trouble I could imagine involved my student loans, but I'd been making payments religiously. I smoothed my cardigan and followed Mrs. Rodriguez through the library's maze of shelves. The conference room was small and sterile, with fluorescent lights that made everything look pale. A man in his 50s sat at the table, wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. His gray hair was perfectly styled, and he had the kind of confident posture that comes from years of delivering news that changes people's lives. "Ms. Chen?" He stood as I entered, extending his hand. "I'm Robert Manning from Manning & Associates. Thank you for meeting with me." I shook his hand, noting how firm his grip was. "I'm sorry, but I think there might be some mistake. I haven't hired a lawyer, and I can't imagine why." "Please, sit down," he interrupted gently. "I have some news about your great-aunt Eleanor Chen." The name hit me like a physical blow. I hadn't heard it in years, not since my grandmother's funeral when I was 12. Eleanor Chen was my grandmother's sister, a woman who had become something of a family legend, the one who had moved to America in the 1950s and supposedly made a fortune, though no one in our family had ever been able to confirm it. "I'm sorry," I said, sinking into the chair across from him. "Are you saying something happened to Eleanor?" Mr. Manning's expression softened. "Ms. Chen, I'm afraid Eleanor passed away 3 months ago. She was 94 years old." The words should have carried more weight, but honestly, I barely knew her. She had been more of a ghost story than a real person in my life. "I'm sorry to hear that, but I don't understand why you're telling me this." "Because, Ms. Chen, you are the sole beneficiary of her estate." The fluorescent lights seemed to flicker. Or maybe that was just my vision adjusting to the shock. "I'm sorry, what?" "Your great-aunt Eleanor left everything to you. Her house, her investments, her collection, everything." I felt like I was watching this conversation happen to someone else. "But that's impossible. I never even met her. Why would she?" "According to the documents in her possession, she had been keeping track of your family for decades. She knew about your education, your work here at the library, your circumstances." He pulled out a thick folder from his briefcase. "She left specific instructions that you were to inherit everything upon her death." My hands were shaking as I reached for the folder. Inside were legal documents, bank statements, and what looked like property deeds. The numbers I saw didn't make sense. They had too many zeros. "Mr. Manning, I need to ask this directly. How much are we talking about?" He leaned back in his chair, studying my face. "The liquid assets alone are worth approximately $2.3 million. The house in Boulder is valued at another $1.8 million. Then there's the collection." "Collection?" "Books, Ms. Chen. Your great-aunt Eleanor was a serious collector of rare and antique books. The preliminary appraisal suggests the collection is worth anywhere from $800,000 to $1.2 million. I couldn't breathe. The conference room felt like it was spinning. "This has to be a mistake. People like me don't inherit millions of dollars. This happens to other people, not—" "Ms. Chen, I assure you this is legitimate. I've been Eleanor's attorney for 15 years. She was very specific about her wishes." He pulled out another document. "She also left you this letter." The envelope was cream-colored and heavy, with my name written in elegant handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. "Dear Sarah, by the time you read this, I will be gone, and you will be very confused. I don't expect you to understand my decision, but I hope you'll give me the chance to explain. I left China in 1952 with nothing but hope and determination. I worked as a seamstress, saved every penny, and eventually opened a small alteration shop in Boulder. I never married, never had children, but I built a life I was proud of. Most importantly, I never forgot where I came from. or the family I left behind. I have been watching you from afar, Sarah. I know about your dedication to books, your kindness to others, and your struggles to make ends meet. I see in you the same determination that brought me to this country 70 years ago. The house in Boulder has been my sanctuary for 40 years. The books have been my companions. I am leaving them to you because I believe you will understand their value, not just their monetary worth, but their true importance as vessels of knowledge and beauty. There is one condition, and it is not a legal one, but a personal request. Before you decide what to do with the inheritance, I ask that you spend at least 1 month living in the house, walk through the rooms, read the books, understand the life I built. Then, make your decision with full knowledge of what you're inheriting. I have also left instructions for you to receive a key to a particular room in the house. Mr. Manning will provide it when you're ready. Be brave, Sarah. This is your chance to build something extraordinary. With love and hope, Eleanor Chen. I read the letter twice, then looked up at Mr. Manning. A particular room? She was quite specific about that. Said you'd understand when the time came. He reached into his briefcase again and pulled out an ornate brass key. This is for you, when you're ready. I stared at the key, feeling its weight in my palm. Everything about this felt surreal. Mr. Manning, I need to see the house. Of course. I can arrange that for this afternoon if you'd like. The property has been maintained exactly as Eleanor left it. I looked around the conference room, then back at the documents spread across the table. My normal life, cataloging books, worrying about rent, eating ramen for dinner, suddenly felt like it belonged to someone else. Yes, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. I'd like to see it today. As we prepared to leave, Mr. Manning gathered his papers. Ms. Chen, may I offer some advice? Please. Your great-aunt was a remarkable woman. She built something meaningful with her life, and she chose you to carry it forward. Don't let the magnitude of this gift frighten you away from accepting it. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I agreed. As we walked back through the library, I caught sight of myself in the window reflection. Same cardigan, same ponytail, same uncertain expression. But somehow, I looked different. Maybe it was just the knowledge that everything was about to change. The drive to Boulder took 40 minutes, winding through the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. The October landscape was stunning. Aspen trees had turned golden, and the mountains rose dramatically against the clear blue sky. Mr. Manning drove a sleek black sedan that smelled like leather and success. Tell me about Eleanor, I said as we climbed into the foothills. What was she like? Brilliant, he said immediately, and incredibly disciplined. She turned that small alteration shop into a chain of 3 successful stores. She invested wisely, lived modestly, and read voraciously. Every time I visited her, she had a new book in her hands. Did she ever talk about family? Often. She kept detailed records of your family's achievements, your graduation from the University of Colorado, your job at the library, even your volunteer work at the Literacy Center. She was very proud of you, even though you'd never met. The house appeared suddenly as we rounded a curve in the mountain road. It was a beautiful Victorian-style home, painted sage green with white trim. Large windows faced the mountains, and I could see a wraparound porch dotted with comfortable-looking chairs. The property was easily 2 acres, with mature trees and what looked like a small garden. She lived here alone? I asked. For 40 years. She loved the isolation, said it helped her think clearly. We pulled into a gravel driveway that circled in front of the house. As I stepped out of the car, I was struck by the absolute silence. No traffic, no city sounds, just the whisper of wind through the pines. The front door was solid oak with stained glass panels, depicting mountains and trees. Mr. Manning used a different key to open it, and we stepped into a foyer that took my breath away. The walls were lined with built-in bookshelves, floor to ceiling, and every shelf was packed with books. The air smelled like aged paper and lemon oil. A grand staircase curved upward, and I could see more bookshelves on the second-floor landing. My God, I whispered. This is just the beginning, Mr. Manning said. The collection spans the entire house. We walked through room after room, each one more incredible than the last. The living room had a massive stone fireplace with comfortable reading chairs positioned to catch the mountain light. The dining room had been converted into a study with a beautiful mahogany desk and more books. The kitchen was surprisingly modern, with granite countertops and professional-grade appliances. She loved to cook, Mr. Manning explained, said it was one of the ways she stayed connected to her heritage. But it was the library that stopped me in my tracks. The back of the house had been converted into a 2-story library with a spiral staircase connecting the floors. The walls were lined with books, organized by subject and author. There were comfortable reading nooks with perfect lighting and tall windows that framed the mountain views. "This is where she spent most of her time," Mr. Manning said. "She cataloged every book herself, created her own system for organization." I walked slowly through the space, running my fingers along the spines of the books. I saw first editions of classic novels, rare collections of poetry, historical texts, and scientific journals. There were books in English, Chinese, and several other languages I couldn't identify. "How many books are there?" I asked. "Approximately 12,000 volumes. Some are extremely rare." She had connections with collectors and auction houses all over the world. I stopped in front of a section labeled Family History and saw books about Chinese immigration, the history of Colorado, and several volumes that appeared to be personal journals. "Mr. Manning, about that key she mentioned." "Ah, yes. Follow me." He led me to a door I hadn't noticed before, tucked behind the spiral staircase. It was painted the same color as the walls, making it almost invisible. He handed me the brass key. "She said you should open this when you felt ready to understand the full scope of her gift." I turned the key and opened the door. Inside was a small room, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet, with a single window and a comfortable chair. But what caught my attention were the walls. They were covered with photographs, documents, and what looked like a detailed family tree. In the center of the room was a desk with a single book lying open on it. I approached the desk cautiously. The book was old, leather-bound, and filled with Eleanor's handwriting. The page it was open to made me gasp. At the top of the page, in Eleanor's elegant script, was written, "Sarah Chen, everything I've built is now yours. But first, you must understand why." Below that was a detailed financial breakdown, not just of the inheritance, but of how Eleanor had built her fortune. There were investment strategies, property acquisitions, and business decisions documented in meticulous detail. But more than that, there was a timeline of my life, with notes about my achievements, my struggles, and my potential. "She'd been planning this for years," I said, more to myself than to Mr. Manning. "Decades, actually. She told me once that she'd been watching your family since she first arrived in America, waiting for the right person to carry on her legacy." I turned the page and found a detailed plan for how the inheritance should be used. Eleanor had envisioned the house becoming a foundation for literacy programs, the book collection becoming a research library, and the financial assets being used to support education initiatives. But at the bottom of the page, in different ink, was a note that looked more recent. "Or Sarah can choose her own path. The gift is given freely, with no obligations except to use it wisely." I looked up at Mr. Manning. "She wanted me to continue her work? She wanted you to have the freedom to choose. But yes, I think she hoped you'd find a way to honor what she'd built while making it your own." As the sun began to set behind the mountains, casting long shadows through the library windows, I realized my life had just become infinitely more complicated. I had inherited not just money and property, but a legacy and the overwhelming responsibility of deciding what to do with it. Standing in that small room, surrounded by the evidence of Eleanor's careful planning and deep love for family she'd never met, I felt the weight of possibility settling on my shoulders. Tomorrow, I would have to figure out how to be Sarah Chen, millionaire. Tonight, I just wanted to sit in Eleanor's chair and try to understand how I'd gotten here. The next morning, I woke up in my cramped Denver apartment, and for a brief moment, I wondered if the entire previous day had been an elaborate dream. But then I saw the brass key on my nightstand, Eleanor's letter folded beside it, and the reality hit me again, like a physical force. I called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years. "Sarah, are you all right?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked, genuine concern in her voice. "You never get sick." "I'm fine," I lied. "Just need a personal day." The truth was, I couldn't imagine sitting at my desk, cataloging returns and helping patrons find romance novels, when I had just inherited a fortune and a house full of rare books. Everything that had seemed important yesterday, my overdue electric bill, my student loan payment, my plan to save for a better apartment, now felt insignificant. I made coffee and sat at my tiny kitchen table, staring at the legal documents Mr. Manning had left with me. The numbers still didn't feel real. 2. 3 million in liquid assets, a house worth 1.8 million, a book collection worth over $1 million. It was more money than I had ever imagined having, more than my parents had made in their entire lives combined. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend, Jessica. "Coffee today? I need to vent about my boss." I stared at the message, trying to figure out how to respond. How do you tell your best friend that you've just become a millionaire? How do you explain that, while she's worried about her demanding boss, you're trying to figure out what to do with an inheritance that could change not just your life, but the lives of everyone around you? I texted back, "Rain check? Something big happened and I need to process. Everything okay? Call me if you need anything." I appreciated her concern, but I wasn't ready to talk about it yet. I wasn't even sure I believed it myself. Instead, I drove back to Boulder. Mr. Manning had given me a full set of keys, and I wanted to explore the house alone, without the pressure of making decisions or responding to questions. I needed to understand what Eleanor had really left me. The October morning was crisp and clear, and the drive through the mountains felt different than it had the day before. Yesterday, I had been a visitor being shown someone else's life. Today, I was supposedly the owner of all of it. The house looked different in the morning light, more welcoming somehow. I parked in the circular driveway and sat in my car for a moment, just looking at the place that was apparently mine now. The morning sun hit the windows perfectly, and I could see the mountains reflected in the glass. I let myself in through the front door and was immediately surrounded by the smell of old books and furniture polish. The silence was profound. No traffic, no neighbors, just the occasional whisper of wind through the pines outside. I walked through the rooms more slowly than I had the day before, trying to understand Eleanor's life through the objects she had chosen to keep. In the living room, I found a reading chair positioned perfectly to catch the morning light, with a small table beside it that held a Chinese tea set and what looked like a well-worn bookmark. The kitchen revealed more about her daily routine. The refrigerator was still stocked with simple, healthy foods, fresh vegetables, herbal teas, and homemade soup in glass containers. There was a note on the counter in Eleanor's handwriting. "Sarah, I've arranged for Mrs. Patterson from down the mountain to maintain the house and garden. She has been paid for the next 6 months. Her number is by the phone." I found the phone number written in Eleanor's careful script and realized she had thought of everything. Even in death, she was taking care of practical details, but it was the library that drew me back. In the full light of day, the collection was even more impressive. I began to explore the sections more carefully, and I realized Eleanor had created something extraordinary. Not just a personal library, but a curated collection that told the story of human knowledge and creativity. There was an entire section devoted to Chinese American history, with books I had never seen before. Another section focused on women's contributions to literature and science. She had collected first editions of works by authors who had been overlooked or undervalued in their time. In the poetry section, I found a book of Emily Dickinson's work with a note tucked inside the cover. "Sarah, I hope you find as much comfort in these words as I have. E." I sat in one of the reading chairs and opened the book. Eleanor had made notes in the margins, and I could see her thoughts and reactions to the poems. It was like having a conversation with her across time. As I continued exploring, I found more notes, tucked into books, written on bookmarks, left in small envelopes throughout the collection. Each one seemed to be meant for me, as if Eleanor had known I would find them. In a book about small business management, "Sarah, building something from nothing requires patience and vision. Don't let others rush you into decisions." In a collection of Chinese poetry, "Sarah, never forget where you came from, but don't let it limit where you can go." In a book about philanthropy, "Sarah, money is just a tool. The real question is what you want to build with it." By noon, I had found dozens of these notes, and I was beginning to understand that Eleanor's gift wasn't just financial, it was educational. She was trying to teach me something through these books, these messages, this carefully constructed environment. I made myself lunch in her kitchen, using her dishes and sitting at her table. Everything in the house was high quality but not ostentatious. Eleanor had clearly had money for years, but she had chosen to live simply, investing in books and experiences rather than luxury goods. After lunch, I returned to the small room behind the spiral staircase. In the daylight, I could see the family tree on the wall more clearly. Eleanor had traced our family's journey from China to America, documenting not just names and dates, but stories and achievements. She had photos of relatives I had never seen, including several of my grandmother as a young woman. I sat at the desk and continued reading through the book Eleanor had left open. The more I read, the more I realized the magnitude of what she was asking me to consider. The inheritance wasn't just about money, it was about responsibility. Eleanor had built something meaningful, and she wanted me to decide how to carry it forward. But she had also been clear that the choice was mine. I could sell everything, pay off my student loans, buy a nice house, and live comfortably for the rest of my life. Or I could try to honor her vision of creating something that would benefit others. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself drawn to a section of the library I hadn't explored yet. It was labeled Future Projects and contained books about education, literacy programs, and community development. There were also folders with Eleanor's notes about potential initiatives she had been considering. One folder contained a detailed proposal for converting the house into a literacy center, with programs for adult education, children's reading programs, and research opportunities for scholars. Another folder outlined plans for digitizing rare books to make them accessible to students who couldn't afford to visit specialized libraries. I realized Eleanor had been working on these plans for years, but she had never implemented them. She had been waiting for the right person to carry them out. As evening approached, I made a decision. I would stay in the house overnight. I needed to understand what it felt like to live in Eleanor's space, to wake up surrounded by her books and her dreams. I called Mrs. Patterson, the neighbor who had been maintaining the house. "Oh, you must be Sarah," she said when I introduced myself. "Eleanor talked about you so often. I'm so sorry for your loss, dear." "Thank you. I was wondering if you could tell me about her. What was she like?" Mrs. Patterson's voice warmed. "She was remarkable, truly. So intelligent and kind. She used to have me over for tea once a week, and we'd talk for hours about books and ideas. She was always working on some project or another." "Did she ever talk about what she hoped I would do with the inheritance?" "Not specifically, but she always said she hoped you'd find a way to share the gift of knowledge the way she had tried to do. She believed education was the key to everything." That night, I made dinner in Eleanor's kitchen and ate by the fireplace in the living room. As darkness fell, I turned on the lamps throughout the house and was amazed by how warm and welcoming the space felt. This wasn't just a house, it was a home, carefully crafted by someone who understood the importance of creating a space for thinking and learning. I chose a book from the poetry section, a collection of Maya Angelou's work, and settled into Eleanor's reading chair. As I read, I found another note tucked between the pages. "Sarah, your voice matters. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." I closed the book and looked around the library. The inheritance wasn't just about money or property. Eleanor had left me a foundation for building something meaningful, but she had also left me the freedom to choose what that something would be. As I prepared for bed in Eleanor's guest room, I found a final note on the nightstand. "Sarah, tomorrow is always a new beginning. Sleep well and dream big." I lay in the comfortable bed, listening to the mountain silence and thinking about the weight of possibility that had settled on my shoulders. Eleanor had given me the tools to build something extraordinary. Now I had to decide if I was brave enough to use them. I woke up in Eleanor's house to the sound of absolute silence, which was jarring after years of living in downtown Denver. The guest room was bathed in soft morning light filtered through pine trees, and for a moment, I forgot where I was. Then I remembered. I was in my house now, surrounded by my books, trying to figure out how to live up to a legacy I never expected to inherit. I made coffee in Eleanor's kitchen and stood at the window, watching the sunrise paint the mountains in shades of pink and gold. The beauty was almost overwhelming, and I found myself wondering if Eleanor had stood in this same spot every morning, drawing inspiration from the view. My phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Rodriguez. "Hope you're feeling better. We miss you at the library." I stared at the message, realizing I had no idea when or if I would return to work. How do you explain to your boss that you've inherited millions of dollars and need to figure out what to do with your life? How do you go back to cataloging returns when you now own a collection of rare books worth more than most people's houses? I was still contemplating this when I heard a car in the driveway. Through the window, I saw an older woman getting out of a small Honda, carrying what looked like a casserole dish. I opened the front door as she approached the porch. She was probably in her 70s, with silver hair pulled back in a practical bun and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "You must be Sarah," she said, smiling warmly. "I'm Helen Patterson. I spoke with you yesterday." "Mrs. Patterson, of course. Thank you for taking care of the house. Please call me Helen." And it was my pleasure. Eleanor was dear to me. She held out the casserole dish. "I brought you some lasagna. I imagine you're not thinking much about cooking right now." I accepted the dish gratefully. "Would you like to come in?" "I'd love to hear more about Eleanor." Helen's eyes lit up. "I'd love to see the house again." Eleanor was always so proud of her library. As we walked through the rooms, Helen shared stories about Eleanor's daily routines. She was up every morning at 6, reading by the window in the living room. She'd spend the morning working on her correspondence. She maintained relationships with book collectors and scholars all over the world. Afternoons were for reading and research. Did she ever seem lonely? Not lonely exactly. Solitary by choice. She said she found more interesting conversation in her books than she did with most people. But she wasn't bitter about it. She genuinely preferred the quiet life she'd built. We reached the library, and Helen paused in the doorway. "This room always took my breath away. The way the light moves through here during the day, it's like being inside a cathedral of knowledge." I noticed Helen's reverent tone when she talked about the books, and I had an idea. "Helen, did Eleanor ever talk about what she hoped would happen to the collection?" "Oh, constantly. She had so many ideas, turning this into a research center, creating programs for children, digitizing rare texts. But she always said she was waiting for the right person to carry out her vision." "What if I told you I was considering doing exactly that?" Helen turned to me with surprise. "You mean it? You'd really consider turning this into something public?" "I'm thinking about it, but I'd need help. I don't know anything about running a foundation or managing educational programs." "Sarah, there are people in this community who would be thrilled to help." Eleanor wasn't the only one who cared about education and literacy. There's a whole network of people who've been waiting for an opportunity like this. That afternoon, Helen introduced me to what she called Eleanor's Circle, a group of retired teachers, librarians, and community volunteers who had been informal advisors to Eleanor over the years. They met at the Boulder Public Library, and when I walked into the conference room, I was surprised to find 12 people waiting for me. "Everyone, this is Sarah Chen," Helen announced. Eleanor's great niece, a woman with short gray hair and intelligent eyes, stood up. "I'm Margaret Walsh. I was the head librarian here for 30 years. Eleanor and I collaborated on several literacy initiatives." A man in his 60s, with a warm smile, introduced himself as David Kim. "I'm a retired teacher. Eleanor funded my classroom library for years, never wanted any recognition for it." One by one, they introduced themselves. Retired educators, volunteers, community organizers. Each had a story about Eleanor's quiet generosity and her passion for education. "We've been hoping for years that Eleanor would move forward with her foundation plans," Margaret said. "She had such brilliant ideas, but she always said she needed the right person to lead them." "What kind of ideas?" I asked. David pulled out a folder. "She proposed a literacy center that would serve both children and adults. Programs for kids who needed extra reading support, GED classes for adults, English as a second language courses for immigrants. She also wanted to create a research library," added a woman named Susan, "a place where scholars could access rare books and historical documents that are usually locked away in private collections." As they talked, I began to understand the scope of Eleanor's vision. She hadn't just been collecting books. She had been building the foundation for a comprehensive educational initiative that could serve the entire region. "The beautiful thing about Eleanor's plan," Margaret said, "is that she understood the connection between individual literacy and community development. She believed that if you give people access to knowledge, they'll use it to improve their lives and their communities." "But I don't know how to run a foundation," I said. "I'm just a librarian." "You're exactly what we need," David said firmly. "You understand the value of books and learning. You know how to organize information and help people find what they need. Most importantly, you care about the same things Eleanor cared about." Helen spoke up. "Sarah, you wouldn't be doing this alone. All of us would help. We've been waiting for this opportunity for years." As the meeting continued, I felt something shifting inside me. These people weren't just offering to help, they were offering to join me in building something meaningful. Eleanor's gift wasn't just about money or books. It was about connecting me with a community of people who shared her values. Over the next few days, I threw myself into understanding Eleanor's vision. I spent hours in the small room behind the spiral staircase, reading through her notes and plans. I discovered that she had been incredibly thorough. She had researched everything from zoning laws to educational licensing requirements. I also spent time getting to know the house itself. Each room had been carefully designed to serve a specific purpose. The dining room would be perfect for seminar discussions. The living room could accommodate small group activities. The kitchen was large enough to prepare meals for events. But it was the library that truly amazed me. Eleanor had organized the collection not just by subject, but by educational level and accessibility. There were sections for beginning readers, advanced scholars, and everyone in between. She had created a resource that could serve learners at every level. I found myself spending hours in the poetry section, reading Eleanor's marginalia and discovering new authors. Her notes revealed not just her thoughts about the poems, but her hopes for how they might inspire others. In a collection of Langston Hughes' work, she had written, "These words changed my understanding of what it means to be American. I hope they do the same for others." One evening, as I sat in Eleanor's reading chair watching the sunset paint the mountains in brilliant colors, I realized I had made my decision. I couldn't walk away from this opportunity. Eleanor had given me the tools to build something extraordinary, and I had found a community of people who were ready to help me do it. I called Mr. Manning and asked him to meet me at the house the next morning. "I want to move forward with establishing the foundation," I told him. "I think Eleanor would be very pleased," he said. That night, I sat at Eleanor's desk and wrote my first official note as the inheritor of her legacy. The Eleanor Chen Foundation for Literacy and Learning will open its doors in spring 2025. Our mission is to provide access to knowledge and educational opportunities for learners of all ages, honoring the belief that education is the key to personal and community development. As I wrote, I felt Eleanor's presence in the room, not in any supernatural sense, but in the way her carefully chosen words and thoughtfully arranged books had guided me to this decision. She had given me more than money or property. She had given me purpose. I went to bed that night with a sense of excitement I hadn't felt in years. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of turning Eleanor's vision into reality. I would transform her house into a place where knowledge would be shared, where people could come to learn and grow, where the gift of literacy would be passed from one generation to the next. For the first time since inheriting Eleanor's legacy, I felt worthy of the trust she had placed in me. 6 months later, I stood in the main library of what was now officially the Eleanor Chen Foundation for Literacy and Learning, watching a group of 8-year-olds discover the magic of poetry. Their teacher, Mrs. Garcia, was reading from the same Maya Angelou collection I had found that first night in Eleanor's house, and I could see the wonder in the children's eyes as they listened to the rhythm and power of the words. Ms. Chen, one of the children, a girl named Emma, approached me with a shy smile. "Mrs. Garcia says you have the most books in the whole world." I laughed, kneeling down to her level. "Not the whole world, Emma, but we do have quite a few. What kind of books do you like?" "Stories about brave girls," she said without hesitation. "Follow me," I said, leading her to a section Eleanor had specifically curated for young readers. "I think you'll find plenty of brave girls here." As Emma excitedly browsed the shelves, I reflected on how much had changed since that shocking Tuesday when Mr. Manning had first appeared at the Denver Public Library. The house had been transformed while maintaining its essential character. The dining room now served as a seminar space where adult learners worked on their GED preparation. The living room had become a comfortable area for reading groups and discussion circles. Eleanor's kitchen was used to prepare meals for events and to teach cooking classes that connected people with their cultural heritage. But the library remained the heart of everything. We had carefully organized the collection to serve our diverse programs while preserving Eleanor's original vision. The rare books were housed in climate-controlled cases, available for serious researchers by appointment. The general collection was accessible to all visitors, with comfortable reading areas positioned throughout the space. Margaret Walsh, who had become our program director, approached me with a clipboard and a satisfied smile. "The adult literacy program is at capacity," she said. "We have a waiting list of 15 people." "That's wonderful," I said, though I was already thinking about how we could expand to serve more people. "There's something else," Margaret continued. "Dr. Rodriguez from the University of Colorado called. She wants to bring a group of graduate students to research some of our rare Chinese-American historical documents. Apparently, word is getting out about the quality of our collection. I felt a surge of pride. Eleanor would have been thrilled to know that her carefully curated collection was being used for serious academic research. That's exactly what she hoped for, I said. David Kim joined us, carrying a stack of essays. The adult writing workshop just finished their first assignment, he said, beaming. Sarah, you need to read these stories. They're incredible. I took the essays and glanced at the first one. It was written by Maria Santos, a 45-year-old woman who had come to us 6 months ago, barely able to read. The title was My American Dream, and as I read the first paragraph, I felt tears welling up in my eyes. I came to America 20 years ago with nothing but hope and my children's hands in mine. I worked in kitchens and cleaned houses, always dreaming of the day I could read the books on the library shelves. Today, at the Eleanor Chen Foundation, I am not just learning to read, I am learning to tell my own story. David, this is beautiful, I said, wiping my eyes. She's not the only one, he said. We have a whole group of students who are discovering they have stories worth telling. Eleanor would be so proud. The afternoon brought a steady stream of visitors. A group of homeschooling parents came to use our resources for their children's education. A retired professor stopped by to donate a collection of science books. A young mother brought her toddler to our children's reading circle. Each interaction reminded me of why Eleanor had been so passionate about creating this space. Knowledge wasn't meant to be hoarded. It was meant to be shared, to grow, to inspire new ideas and new dreams. As evening approached, I found myself in the small room behind the spiral staircase, now converted into my office. The walls still displayed Eleanor's family tree and her notes about the foundation's mission. But I had added my own touches, photos of our students, letters of thanks from program participants, and a bulletin board tracking our progress toward our goals. I was reviewing applications for our new scholarship program when Helen Patterson knocked on my door. Sarah, there's someone here to see you, she said, her voice carrying an unusual excitement. She says she's Eleanor's friend from New York. I looked up, confused. Eleanor had a friend from New York? Apparently so. She's quite elderly, but she insisted on driving here to meet you. I followed Helen to the main library, where I found a tiny woman, probably in her 90s, sitting in one of our reading chairs. She had silver hair pulled back in an elegant chignon and was wearing a beautiful silk scarf. Despite her age, her eyes were sharp and alert. You must be Sarah, she said, rising carefully from her chair. I'm Ruth Goldman. Eleanor and I were pen pals for over 50 years. Pen pals? I asked, shaking her delicate hand. Oh yes, dear. We met through a book collector's newsletter in 1970 and have been corresponding ever since. She wrote to me about you many times over the years. Ruth smiled warmly. I had to come see what you've done with her dream. She wrote about me to you? Constantly. She was so proud of your work at the library, your dedication to helping others learn. She always said you were the one who would understand what she was trying to build. Ruth looked around the library with obvious appreciation. This is exactly what she envisioned. A place where books aren't just stored, but where they're used to transform lives. Would you like a tour? I asked. I'd love one. But first, I have something for you. Ruth reached into her purse and pulled out a small package wrapped in tissue paper. Eleanor asked me to give this to you if you decided to carry on her work. I unwrapped the package carefully and found a beautiful antique bookmark made of silver, with Chinese characters engraved on one side and English words on the other. The English side read, "Knowledge is the bridge between dreams and reality." She had it made for you specifically, Ruth said. She said you'd need a reminder that what you're doing here isn't just about books. It's about helping people build the lives they've always imagined. As we toured the foundation together, Ruth shared stories about Eleanor's generosity that I had never heard. She had quietly funded libraries in underserved communities, provided scholarships for immigrant students, and supported literacy programs across the country. She never wanted recognition, Ruth said. She believed the work was its own reward, but she always dreamed of creating something lasting, something that would continue to grow and serve others long after she was gone. In the Adult Learning Center, we found Maria Santos working on her second essay. She looked up as we entered and smiled brightly. Ms. Chen, I wanted to thank you again for this opportunity. My daughter is so proud that her mama is learning to write. Maria, this is Mrs. Goldman. She was Eleanor's friend for many years. Maria's eyes widened. Mrs. Eleanor was a saint. She created this place for people like me. After Ruth left, promising to stay in touch and to visit again soon, I found myself alone in the library as the sun set behind the mountains. I sat in Eleanor's old reading chair, holding the bookmark she had made for me, and thought about the journey that had brought me here. A year ago, I had been a struggling librarian, worried about paying bills and wondering if I was making any real difference in the world. Now I was running a foundation that served hundreds of people every month, preserving rare books for future generations, and helping adults and children discover the transformative power of literacy. But more than that, I had found my purpose. Every morning when I drove up the mountain to the foundation, I felt the same sense of excitement and possibility that I imagined Eleanor had felt when she first envisioned this place. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica, who had become one of our most enthusiastic volunteers. Just finished helping with the children's writing workshop. 3 kids wrote their first stories today. This place is magic. I smiled, remembering how overwhelmed I had felt when I first learned about the inheritance. I had worried about being worthy of Eleanor's trust, about having the skills and knowledge to carry out her vision. But I had learned that building something meaningful isn't about having all the answers. It's about being willing to learn, to listen, and to surround yourself with people who share your commitment to making a difference. As I prepared to lock up for the evening, I made my usual rounds through the building. In the Adult Learning Center, I found a note someone had left on the table. "Thank you for giving me a place to grow. This is where I learned that it's never too late to chase your dreams." In the children's section, I found a drawing tucked between the books, a picture of a little girl reading under a tree with the words, "My favorite place," written in crayon at the bottom. These small tokens of appreciation reminded me why Eleanor had been so passionate about creating this space. Education wasn't just about acquiring knowledge, it was about discovering your own potential, finding your voice, and building the confidence to pursue your dreams. I walked through the main library one last time, running my hand along the spines of Eleanor's carefully chosen books. In the morning, these shelves would be filled with people seeking knowledge, inspiration, and connection. Children would discover new worlds through stories. Adults would gain the skills they needed to build better lives. Researchers would uncover forgotten histories and preserve them for future generations. As I turned off the lights and headed home to my new apartment in Boulder, smaller than Eleanor's house, but much larger than my old place in Denver, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. I had taken Eleanor's gift and transformed it into something that would outlive both of us. But more than that, I had discovered that inheriting Eleanor's legacy wasn't about the money or the property or even the books. It was about inheriting her belief that education has the power to transform lives, communities, and the world. Eleanor Chen had come to America with nothing but determination and hope. She had built a life of meaning and purpose, and she had passed that possibility on to me. Now it was my responsibility to ensure that the Eleanor Chen Foundation would continue to grow and serve others for generations to come. As I drove down the mountain, I thought about the bookmark Eleanor had made for me. Knowledge is the bridge between dreams and reality. She had understood that education isn't just about learning facts or acquiring skills. It's about discovering what's possible and finding the courage to make it happen. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities. There would be more students to serve, more programs to develop, more ways to honor Eleanor's vision while making it my own. But tonight, I was content to know that I had found my place in the world, carrying forward a legacy of learning, literacy, and hope. The books that had once seemed dusty and forgotten had opened to reveal not just my inheritance, but my destiny, and I was finally ready to embrace it fully. 5 years after that life-changing Tuesday when Mr. Manning first walked into the Denver Public Library, I stood before a packed auditorium at the University of Colorado, preparing to give the keynote address at the National Literacy Conference. The irony wasn't lost on me. The shy librarian who used to worry about speaking up in staff meetings was now addressing hundreds of educators and community leaders. "My name is Sarah Chen," I began, my voice carrying clearly through the microphone. "And 5 years ago, I inherited something that changed not just my life, but the lives of thousands of people in our community. I inherited the belief that education is the most powerful tool we have for transforming lives." As I spoke about the Eleanor Chen Foundation's impact, over 3,000 people served, 400 adults who had earned their GEDs, 150 children who had overcome reading difficulties, 25 research projects completed using our rare book collection. I thought about how far we'd all come. The foundation had grown beyond Eleanor's wildest dreams. We now operated 3 satellite locations in addition to the main Boulder facility. Our digital literacy program had reached students across Colorado and beyond. The scholarship fund we'd established had sent 47 students to college, including Maria Santos's daughter, who was now studying to become a teacher herself. But perhaps the most meaningful development had been the mentorship program we'd created. Former students were now returning as volunteers and tutors, creating a cycle of learning and giving that Eleanor would have loved. Emma, the little girl who had loved stories about brave girls, was now 14 and spent her weekends reading to younger children in our program. After my speech, during the reception, a young woman approached me with tears in her eyes. "Miss Chen, I'm Dr. Lisa Park. I'm a pediatrician now, but 10 years ago, I was struggling to learn English after immigrating from South Korea. I used your foundation's ESL program to prepare for my medical school entrance exams." These moments, hearing how our work had rippled out into the world in ways we never could have anticipated, reminded me daily of why Eleanor had been so passionate about education. Knowledge shared becomes knowledge multiplied. The financial aspects of managing the inheritance had proven less daunting than I'd initially feared. With Mr. Manning's guidance and the help of a financial advisory board we'd established, we had grown the original endowment through careful investments and strategic partnerships. The foundation was now financially stable enough to continue its work indefinitely. More importantly, we had built something sustainable. The programs didn't depend solely on me or any single person. We had developed a strong board of directors, experienced staff, and a network of community partners who shared our mission. As I flew back to Denver that evening, I pulled out the silver bookmark Eleanor had made for me. I carried it everywhere now, a tangible reminder of the woman whose vision had made everything possible. The inscription still moved me. Knowledge is the bridge between dreams and reality. I thought about Eleanor often, especially during quiet moments in the library. I wondered what she would think of the children's laughter echoing through her former home, of the adult students celebrating their achievements in her dining room, of the researchers making discoveries in her carefully curated collection. I imagined she would be pleased, but not surprised. She had chosen me carefully, just as she had chosen every book in her collection. She had seen something in me that I hadn't seen in myself, the potential to carry forward her legacy while making it uniquely my own. The next morning, I arrived at the foundation to find a familiar scene. Maria Santos was helping a new student with her first writing assignment. David Kim was leading a discussion about American history, and Margaret Walsh was coordinating with a group of university researchers who had come to study our immigration documents collection. In the children's section, I found a new addition, a reading nook that Emma and several other teenage volunteers had created for the youngest visitors. They had painted a mural on the wall depicting children from around the world reading books, with the words "Every story matters" written in multiple languages. "What do you think?" Emma asked, approaching me with the confidence of someone who had grown up in this nurturing environment. "We wanted to make sure the little kids know that their stories are important too." "I think it's perfect," I said, and I meant it. This was exactly the kind of initiative Eleanor would have supported. Young people taking ownership of the space and making it better for others. That afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Rodriguez, my former supervisor from the Denver Public Library, came for her first visit to the foundation. She walked through the rooms with obvious amazement, pausing frequently to examine the programs in action. "Sarah, this is incredible," she said as we concluded the tour in the main library. "You've created something truly special here." "It wasn't just me," I said. "Eleanor laid the foundation, and dozens of people have helped build what you see today. But you were the one who had the vision to bring it all together," she insisted. "You've grown so much since those days when you worried about speaking up in meetings." She was right. The inheritance had given me more than financial security. It had given me confidence. Learning to manage the foundation, speak at conferences, and advocate for our programs had pushed me far beyond my comfort zone. I had discovered strengths I never knew I possessed. As the day wound down, I sat in my office reviewing applications for our newest initiative, a mobile literacy unit that would bring books and learning opportunities to rural communities throughout Colorado. It was an ambitious project, but we had learned that ambitious projects were often the most rewarding. Helen Patterson knocked on my door, as she did most evenings before heading home. At 78, she was still one of our most dedicated volunteers, managing our community outreach programs with boundless energy. "Sarah, I have something to tell you," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "I've been corresponding with Ruth Goldman, Eleanor's friend from New York." "How is she doing?" I asked. Ruth had become a regular visitor and supporter of the foundation. "Very well, but that's not why I'm mentioning her. She told me something interesting about Eleanor that I thought you should know." Helen paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. Eleanor apparently kept detailed journals throughout her life, documenting not just her daily activities, but her thoughts about the future of the foundation. "Journals? Ruth has them. Eleanor asked her to keep them safe and to share them with you when she felt you were ready to receive them." My heart began to race. Ready for what? "Ruth thinks that time has come. She's driving out next week to bring them to you. She says Eleanor wanted you to read them after you'd had time to establish your own vision for the foundation." The thought of reading Eleanor's private thoughts, her detailed plans and dreams for the work we were carrying forward, filled me with both excitement and nervousness. What if her vision differed significantly from what we had built? What if I had missed something important? But as I looked around my office, at the photos of our students, the letters of thanks, the evidence of lives changed and dreams fulfilled, I realized that Eleanor would be proud of what we had accomplished. We had honored her core beliefs while adapting to the needs of our community and the opportunities of our time. That weekend, I spent time in the small room that had once been Eleanor's private planning space and was now a quiet retreat within the foundation. I reread her original letter to me, marveling at how accurately she had predicted the journey I would take. "Be brave, Sarah," she had written. "This is your chance to build something extraordinary." I had been brave, though I hadn't always felt that way. I had made difficult decisions, taken calculated risks, and pushed through moments of doubt and uncertainty. Most importantly, I had learned to trust in the vision Eleanor had shared with me and in the community of people who had joined me in making it real. The foundation had become more than a literacy center or a rare book collection. It had become a symbol of what's possible when someone believes in the transformative power of education and has the courage to act on that belief. As I prepared to leave that evening, I made my usual rounds through the building. In the Adult Learning Center, someone had left a new note. "This place saved my life. I came here broken and leave here whole." In the children's section, I found a book left open to a page with a handwritten note in a child's careful printing. "Thank you for teaching me that reading is magic." These messages reminded me daily that the work we were doing extended far beyond test scores or program statistics. We were helping people discover their own potential, find their voices, and build the confidence to pursue their dreams. Walking to my car under the brilliant Colorado stars, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The inheritance had been life-changing, certainly, but not in the ways I had initially imagined. The money had provided security and opportunity, but the real gift had been the chance to be part of something larger than myself. Eleanor Chen had come to America with nothing but hope and determination. She had built a life of meaning and purpose, carefully preserving knowledge and resources for future generations. She had trusted me to carry that legacy forward, and I had discovered that I was capable of far more than I had ever imagined. Now, as I drove home through the mountain darkness, I looked forward to reading Eleanor's journals and learning more about the remarkable woman whose vision had made everything possible. But I also knew that the foundation's future would be shaped by all of us, the staff, volunteers, students, and community members who had joined together to create something extraordinary. The books that had once seemed dusty and forgotten had indeed opened to reveal my inheritance. But they had also revealed something even more valuable, the understanding that knowledge shared becomes a gift that keeps growing, touching lives in ways we can never fully measure or predict. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities. There would be more students to serve, more programs to develop, more ways to honor Eleanor's vision while continuing to adapt and grow. But tonight, I was content to know that we had built something lasting, something worthy of the trust Eleanor had placed in me all those years ago. The Eleanor Chen Foundation for Literacy and Learning had become exactly what she had envisioned, a bridge between dreams and reality, a place where knowledge transforms lives and a testament to the enduring power of education to change the world, one person at a time.